my talk is about Keycloak. So this is an identity management tool, and let's dive a bit in the technical aspect. So if I would like, as a business, as a person, as a company, to invest into identity, how can I achieve this? So what would be the tools necessary? So thank you, Edgar, for introducing me. Just a couple of more words. I have this slide ready. So yeah, my name is Alexey Buzdin. I'm CTO at A-Heads Consulting. And if you've been attending developer tech conferences in Baltic states, maybe you already saw me speaking or organizing them. So I'm pretty active in the developer tech community here in Baltics. And speaking about Keycloak, so if we open Keycloak webpage, if we Google what Keycloak is, we'll open this very nice looking website saying that Keycloak is an identity and access management tool sponsored by Red Hat. So Red Hat is a worldwide famous IT company that does solutions and software for businesses to run their application. So software for infrastructure. If maybe you know, so they've built a very famous Red Hat Linux distribution, which runs across millions, even billions of servers where our applications, where our web apps are being run. So they're doing a lot of great stuff, but maybe not that seen for the public. And to start the discussion, to start explaining what Keycloak is, maybe let's start with a simple question. So how Keycloak works and how we as users could interact with it. So daily we open websites, web pages, trying to get desired information out of them. So some of the websites are public. Some of the websites have identity access control. For example, simple login screen. Yeah? So if I as a user access a web page and would like to get some private information or information that is only close to the users, then I would need to log in. So at that point, the web app can see that a person is not logged in and redirect us to a Keycloak login form. So at that point, a user can enter her or his credentials, username, password to Keycloak, and check whether everything is okay, password is valid, and click on login button. At that point, Keycloak's as an identity management system validates the identity. So we will talk about what kind of identity management Keycloak provides in a bit further down the line. But at this point, yeah, let's assume that we are entering a login and a password. So Keycloak validates that, and as a result, gives a special token to a user. So imagine a key that he or she authenticated, he or she is a valid user, and he can proceed further using the application. So Dmitry was already mentioning the single sign-on token. So Keycloak also provides us a capability, and it's one of the most frequently used use cases for Keycloak, to have multiple applications, both developed internally, or for example, you bought a product that you would also like to have a similar look and feel when you onboard new people, new users, and log in there. Yeah? Okay, getting back to the presentation. So when a user logs in, Keycloaks give a key back. So using this key, as with a normal door, a user can get to a door, open it, and get past the door to the desired content. So the same happens here. With this key, web app validates that key is actual, and to do that, it actually asks Keycloak whether this key is still actual, can this key be trusted, didn't it expire already, or something like that, to validate that key is not a replica, key is not forged, and only then user can get the desired access. So hopefully this explains the use case for us as a user, how we will interact with Keycloak. So we would use it login form. But now let's maybe discuss what Keycloak is to understand how we can use it. So first of all, Keycloak is an open source tool built with Java language. So what does open source mean? It means that you are quite sure what you're getting. If you're using some kind of vendor, like Okta, which was mentioned previously, or I don't know, tools from Microsoft or from other companies, you are not quite sure how they operate. Yeah, so, but here, if you would like, you could investigate and be a super expert of the internals of the project. So this is good. Another thing, that KeyCloak is actually free. So you don't have any costs to install it, to maintain it, to use it. That could be very handy for some businesses. Yeah. Another point, that KeyCloak is future complete and stable. So by stable, I mean that first stable version of KeyCloak was released back in 2014, so already 8 years ago. And future complete means that if you would like to have an identity management system in your company, KeyCloak would fit your needs. It has everything out of the box to get you started with average life use cases. Of course, if you have some very specific niche, some very specific tools or something like that, those maybe will not be supported. But the user community around KeyCloak is very big, and there is a lot of also like plugins, extensions, and stuff like that that can be installed with quite ease. But we will get into that a bit further down the line. So next, so KeyCloak itself is just a tool. Yeah? So you are responsible to understand and to decide how to use it. You can install it on premise, meaning on your own servers, or you could install it to the cloud environment. So it also has a nice support of cloud with a containerized Docker version of KeyCloak. Yeah? So it's completely up to you, up to the users, up to administrators, to decide how to use it and where to put it. And yeah, speaking about the protocols, what I meant, what are the standard protocols? So maybe you have heard about OpenID already, about OAuth 2.0, SAML, and also Dmitry mentioned WebAuthn. So those are considered by industry, not by KeyCloak, by industry, as default standard protocols that are secure and that can give you the identity and prove the identity of a person. So KeyCloak supports them out of the box, but it's not limited only to that. Yeah? And maybe when I first mentioned that KeyCloak is built with Java, yeah, it raised concerns that maybe it's not a good fit for other technologies because we have PHP, .NET, JavaScript. There are a lot of different programming languages in the world. But actually, these standard protocols, which I mentioned, OpenID Connect, OAuth, SAML, so they are platform agnostic. That means that by installing KeyCloak, the clients, the applications that are using KeyCloak will not know that it's KeyCloak. They use standard protocols, and every platform, every programming language like .NET, JavaScript has their own support for the standard protocols. So you can be very sure that by using KeyCloak, you will not create a problem for your IT guys to integrate it. Yeah? So it's standard. So we've discussed what KeyCloak is. Let's continue. So what would be the use cases when I would like to use KeyCloak? So first, as I mentioned, it's free. So if we are looking into the commercial space of identity management and who provides that, we need to be pretty sure about how much people would use it, how much users who would have, what kind of traffic would be. Maybe there will be some concerns about the platform, that some tools, for example, could only be run on platform X. Yeah? But with KeyCloak, it's free, you can put it anywhere, and there are no limits. So it's up to you to decide what are the limits and how you can and want to use it. So the second important point is that the data inside KeyCloak is owned and managed by you. So if you don't trust the corporations, or if you have a regulatory laws and you need to comply to them, maybe you are not okay and cannot use some services provided by other companies. But with KeyCloak, again, this is up to you. Where do you store the data? So it's just a tool that allows you to collect data and to verify data. We will talk about the technical aspects of data management, about the extension and stuff like that a bit further down the presentation. Yeah? And Also, I've mentioned that previously. So Keycloak, you can consider it to be as a Swiss Army knife identity tool. So if you look into vendors, into paid competitors, they have a very good niche, they have a good support of particular tools and standards, but Keycloak provides all the standards. So maybe it will not have a user experience the same as it would have in a paid vendor software as a service tool. But what it excels at, that it provides a good support for everything. Yeah? So you're quite sure what you're getting, and you're quite sure that if down the road you will have additional use cases, Keycloak will be able to support it. If you choose a different vendor, you cannot be sure that when in 5 years or 3 years, if you change something, it will still be actual and it will still work for you as a company. Yeah? And so Keycloak is very extensible and can be enhanced with different additional protocols. So if you would like to develop your own protocol, you can do that. You can plug it into Keycloak, it will work. Yeah? For other competitors, not like that, there are some restrictions. Yeah? And also, data migration from other tools is quite easy with Keycloak. So if you have an Active Directory or LDAP directory, Keycloak can automatically synchronize all the data from them to itself. So plugging it into a running system is easy or easier than other tools. Yeah? So also, if you would like to create a public-facing website, you would like to cover as much as identification providers or trust providers as mentioned here in the webinar, there are already some built-in, like Google, Facebook, PayPal, etc. You don't need to do anything, don't need to develop anything. With a simple click, you can enable this identity provider. Yeah? And nice cherry on top is that Keycloak has its own administration tool and self-service tool, which I will also explain a bit later, which allows you as administrators to manage the data, manage the configuration, and also provide a way for a user, for actual user, to get a hold of his data, understand what is stored, where is stored, and configure it for his own preference. So let's go next, regarding data. So if you look at software as a service solutions, all the identity information, the user database, they store inside their own data centers. But with Keycloak, if you already have a landscape of systems, you have a database of choice, you can easily plug in your database, which you manage, which you have expert database engineers for, to Keycloak. So it supports relational database, and that makes it easier for you to integrate it into your landscape. And also that means that if you have security best practices and policies for database administration, for data safekeeping, you can apply it to Keycloak. There are no limits, it's just a database, just a data inside your database. So one of the important aspects of Keycloak, which I would like to explain you, is called realm. Yeah? So Keycloak operates in so-called realms. So what is a realm? Maybe the name is not very self-explanatory, but try to imagine, and a synonym of that word would be a world. Yeah? So imagine that you have a system, and this system operates in different worlds, in different dimensions, so to say. Yeah? And each of this world or dimension would have its own set of users, application, roles, and workflows. So those realms are isolated. A good example why you would need this. So imagine you have this Keycloak as a centerpiece of your identity management. But in your company, you have different use cases. You have a public-facing portal where users can log in, they can register, and create a new account. So you need to have an onboarding procedure, how to register new users and stuff like that. They have their own set of applications they can access. And maybe with roles, they don't have any actual roles, you know, they're just users. Yeah? But in the same time, you have a big part of company that is in a back office. So those are the support personnel. Maybe those are administrators. Maybe these are business people who would like to access or check something. Yeah? And you could create a different realm, different world dimension for those people and have a completely different set of rules, requirements, and processes underneath. Or right now, in the last 5-10 years, it's becoming popular for product companies to build their own marketplace to enhance their product. So imagine you have a nice idea of a startup, you wrote a to-do application where users can register what kind of tasks they would like to accomplish during the day. Yeah? And at some point, you would create a marketplace for extensions that other companies could write and plug into your system. So to do that, you also need to prove the identity, that those applications are trustworthy, that people who are using those applications are also logged in correctly. So for this use case, you could also create a new realm, yeah? So new dimension. So why those realms are important? Because this is actually the place where you can configure how your identity management flow will work. So first, you can plug in and enable, disable identity providers. For example, for public-facing users, you would like to have Google, Facebook, PayPal, Microsoft authentication. For the back office, for the colleagues, they should log in with their private company-managed credentials. Yeah? So for some realms, maybe you would like to have a user registration flow. That a user goes to your website, then it opens a registration form, fills in all the information about herself or himself, and then we need to validate that this person is actual. How can we do that? Usually you send an email, right, to an email client. Then this person can open an email, see a registration link, a proof registration link, click on it, and get his identity approved. Or, for example, some companies use SMS as a way to identify and prove that this is a real person, not a scam and not a bot. Yeah? So these can be configured in Keycloak realm. So each realm could have a different registration flow with SMS, with emails, maybe with manual verification using a phone call from a bot or from a fellow colleague. Also, the password policies are very important. As Dmitry and Edgar mentioned, most of the hacks and data breaches are happening due to low and not very secure passwords that we are using. So in each realm, you can configure those policies. You can say how long the password would be, the frequency when you need to reset it or not reset it at all. So again, you are in control to configure this for each of your use cases. The same thing is with two-factor authentication. So nowadays, all of the systems tend to protect themselves with a second factor, meaning that you not only need to log in with your email and password, but also need to prove that it is you by pressing a button on your mobile device or entering something from an SMS you receive. So these two-factor authentication settings can also and are also per realm. So you can freely play around with it and configure it to your workflows that you would like to have. Same with email integration, which I mentioned previously. So you can configure that Keycloak itself will use email as a way to communicate with customers. So you don't need to develop a separate tool to handle sending emails, resetting passwords and stuff like that. Keycloak already have everything bundled and configurable for you. So as I mentioned previously, you can plug Keycloak to another systems that store user data, like Active Directory, like LDAP. So it's also configurable per realm. And if you need to collect additional set of fields, for example, you would like to store some preferences of a user or maybe additional personal details, this can be also done per realm in Keycloak. You can say that for public-facing realm, you would like to collect not only the name and password and the login, but also date of birth, maybe some certificates and government identities and stuff like that, and store it for your needs, if that's needed by business. Yeah? And also the single sign-on option, so that's also possible to tweak, to configure in the realm settings. So realm is a centerpiece of Keycloak configuration, which is used by the Keycloak. And just to prove how Keycloak is configurable, I want to show you a small, maybe not very clear picture of the workflow. So this is a part of the user interface of Keycloak that allows you to configure different workflows. So this is a very big table, but the important parts are on the left side. You can see a drop-down with a selection list of flows. So you can create new flows, you can manage them, start, stop, enable, disable them. And in the same flow, you have a new button on the right, top side, which you can add new steps. Yeah? So you can either select a step, a configuration of a flow, for example, how a user wants to register. So when a new user registration comes in, you want to send an email. But at some point, you would maybe like to enhance it and have a bot call from a robot. At some point, maybe you would like to, I don't know, integrate with another system to scan government ID or a passport. So this can be possible with this click new button. When you click new, you can customize a workflow and build it as with Lego from default customization and components, or build your own components, and then they will be easily plugged into this workflow engine. So this is the customization of Keycloak that is very awesome and very friendly for the business ahead when you don't know how the landscape will change tomorrow. And maybe we will be speaking about the back office, the back configurations around and stuff like that, but how a real user would see this. Yeah? So let me present you a default login page. So this is what Keycloak provides out of the box. So it has a set of themes. So login theme is what we see on the right side of the screen. And you can see it has input for username, for password, remember me button, forget password, and stuff like that. Everything can be customizable. You can disable, enable for some applications to have this ability to reset password, to remember the password and stuff like that, or you can disable that. And you can fully customize the UI with an extension plugin. So I will, at the end of the presentation, I will show a different example of the same login form that Keycloak provides, but customly built by us and serving a bit different use cases than just a simple login password. So this is a login theme. So account team is basically what you as a user would see if you want to access self-service. We will talk about that a bit further down the line. So that's a web page when you can see what kind of data is being collected by the company that uses Keycloak, and you can do something with it. Yeah, for example, if you would like to delete all the data for GDPR concerns or security concerns, you could manage that from the self-service portal, from the accounting. Same with admin console and email. So you can customize the look and feel of how emails are being sent, how the admin console is done, and etc. So it's very customizable. And the themes are HTML-based. So if you know that all websites are built with HTML, same is with this login theme. So they have HTML using time-lift tool for adding the dynamics and additional stuff. Yeah? So what I want to mention with this particular slide is that you have some default settings, but you're not limited. So you're only limited with your imagination and with your UI UX designers on how you would like to have a login form and look and feel. And that can be implementable with ease with Keycloak. And also, if you need internalization with different languages support, this is also built in Keycloak and can be freely used in the theme framework. So now a couple of words about the self-service. So Keycloak allows you to enable or disable self-service when people could manage their own data. Yeah? So on the right side, you can see a snippet when a person can change its details, first name, last name, or maybe some other fields that are provided during registration. They can reset passwords if they forgot them. They can enable two-factor authentication, for example, add a new device. If you've lost your previous phone, you can log in and add a new one. Or your old one was, I don't know, stolen, then you can safely disable it and be sure that no one will be able to falsely log into the system. Yeah? Same is with account history. So you can see who has logged in when using your account and be sure that this information is present and you know how to act if you see some strange anomalies. Yeah? And this is an example, again, of a default look and feel of Keycloak, what it provides to you as a user. So this is the self-service. You see, you can change a password, you can add two-factor authentication with an authentication application. You can see the device activity, so what kind of devices are right now active and using the application managed by Keycloak. You can stop it, deactivate it, and stuff like that. And also, you can review the applications that you granted permission for your account. So imagine if you have a Keycloak managing multiple tens or hundreds of different applications, like Facebook does. Yeah? So in Facebook, you can control who got your identity from Facebook and who can use it. And from Facebook account, you can freely disable the unwanted applications, I don't know, Puzzle Quest or something like that, so that you don't want to have your identity for no longer because you've stopped using it. So that's built in Keycloak and can be used. So about extending Keycloak. So I've a lot of times mentioned that it's possible to extend it, it's quite customizable. So what do I mean by that? So Keycloak, as I mentioned, is open source, and they've built a nice way that any component inside Keycloak source code can be changed or customized with specific programming skills. So some places are easy to configure, some places are maybe more complicated and will require some time. And if you would like to do something very custom to Keycloak that is not supported by default workflows, then Java library, Java programming library needs to be developed and uploaded to the instance of Keycloak that you would like to use, that you're using. So what kind of extensions are possible? So first, custom authentication workflows. By that I mean, so Edgars was telling a lot about different identity providers. So Smart ID, Mobile ID, AppRx Mobile, eID cards. These all flows are possible to integrate with Keycloak with not a very big programming effort. So if you have identity providers, for example, there is Facebook, but you would like to integrate with Draugi.mlv. This is also possible. So if Draugi.mlv supports standard protocols of OpenID, then you can plug it into Keycloak with some small programming effort. Yeah? So custom password policies. If you would like to check maybe databases of leaked passwords and verify that this password is safe to use, you can do that. You can write a small plugin to do this additional capability in Keycloak. Or, for example, if you're storing additional information in Keycloak, in addition to name, password, and username, you could also create a custom API that would allow your applications to get that information stored in Keycloak for your other needs. Yeah? And as I mentioned before, so enrichment of logging forms, account console, and stuff like that. So all look and feel that you see in Keycloak can be customizable. And just as an example, so what we've did at A-Heads, and as a sample, so on the right side, you can see this is the same login form that I've showed previously, but customized. So here, you can see that there are no login password, but there is Smart ID, AppRx Mobile, and eID cards. So everything in Keycloak works the same, but just with small enhancements, you can bring forward the capabilities that your business and your users need for identity management and for login. Yeah? So we've built quite a few of different teams, extensions for trust providers like Smart ID, Mobile ID, also with physical ID cards. So you would have a website and only with a plugged USB adapter with an ID card inside it, you can log in. Yeah? So bank authentication is also possible. So if you've used Latvia LV, you see a lot of different bank authentication and trust providers like Citadel, Swedbank, and other banks. So you can easily integrate them into KeyCloak if there is a need for that. Or develop any other authentication if you have a self-brew authentication solution inside the company. That's also possible. Yeah? And do any other tweaks. Yeah? So we at A-Heads love KeyCloak. We have a lot of experience with it, and if you have any questions, then we would be glad to have a talk with you and discuss them and share our knowledge. So thank you, and now I think we have some time for Q&A.